Someone laughed. Someone else gasped. But by the time the sound of the zipper hit the air, you could hear a pin drop. Every head in that classroom had turned. Every body froze, and all eyes locked onto Malik, silent, calm, unreadable, standing. Beside his chair, slowly unzipping his worn-out black backpack. The room didn't move. Even Tyler, the class jock who had been mocking him seconds earlier, stood still, hand half raised, mouth slightly open. He wasn't laughing anymore. No one was. It was like something had shifted, like whatever was in that backpack wasn't just an object but a line none of them should have ever crossed. 20 minutes earlier, Malik had just been another invisible. Face in the corner, hood up, notebook open, scribbling with his usual focus while the rest of the class joked and whispered across desks. He never talked, never interrupted, just showed up, did his work, and disappeared. Some kids called him weird, others just ignored him. But Tyler needed an audience. And today, that meant Malik. "Yo, silent freak," Tyler had called, out, loud enough to make the back row chuckle. "Still writing your creepy serial killer notes?" A few students snorted. Malik didn't look up. That only annoyed Tyler more. He leaned over, yanked Malik's backpack off the floor, and held it up like a trophy. "Let's see what the freak's hiding, yeah?" Malik stood slowly. Not rushed, not flustered. He didn't grab or shout. He just walked toward Tyler with a gaze so calm it unsettled everyone watching. Tyler smirked, still pretending to be in control, and tossed the bag toward Malik's desk. It landed with a dull thud. Malik didn't pick it up right away. He looked at the bag, then at Tyler, then scanned the class, slowly, deliberately, and finally he bent down, lifted it, placed it gently on the desk, and began to unzip it. That's when everything stopped. The laughter died. The noise vanished. A weird hush fell over the room, unnatural, tight, like the air had been sucked out of it. Phones hovered midair. Someone dropped a pencil but didn't pick it up. One girl clutched her sweater like a shield. Tyler's smile faltered for the first time as Malik's hand reached inside. And then Malik spoke, calm, cold, and without blinking. "You wanted to see, right? Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, and let us know. Have you ever seen someone so calm they made a room full of noise go quiet with a single move? Because what comes out of that bag, it's not what they expected, but it's what they needed to see." Malik didn't say another word after that line. He just sat back down and slowly pulled the first object out of his bag. The rest of the classroom watched as if they were frozen in glass. But what they saw wasn't a weapon or a threat. It was a box, worn at the edges, hand-painted navy blue, with a cracked plastic cover that barely held on to the nameplate on top. And as the classroom watched in stunned silence, Malik gently placed the box on his desk, and didn't open it. He didn't need to. Because this story didn't start in that classroom. It didn't start with Tyler, or the teasing, or the thrown backpack. It started years ago, in a one-bedroom apartment across town, where a 5-year-old boy had once waited at the window, watching red and white lights flashing across the night. That night, they told Malik his father had died a hero, a firefighter, a rescuer, a man who went back into the building for one more child and never made it out. Malik remembered staring at his mom, who didn't cry, not in front of him. She just stared at the door, waiting for a knock that had already come. Malik didn't speak much after that, not because he couldn't, because he didn't want to. Words, to him, felt like broken promises, things adults used to soften tragedies. Over the years, he learned to carry silence like armor. It made him invisible, yes, but also untouchable. He started writing, sketching, building things. While other kids played video games, Malik took apart broken speakers and rewired old phones he found in dumpsters. He was obsessed with one idea: building something lasting, something that couldn't be taken away. His teachers barely noticed. The few who did praised his quiet focus, never bothering to ask why it was so quiet in the first place. Every day, after school, Malik walked to the fire station where his father's photo still hung on a wall near the break room. The firefighters. They knew who he was. They greeted him with nods and quiet respect. One of them once said, "You walk like your dad used to." Calm. Like you've already sized up the fire before you stepped in. Malik never forgot that. So when the school announced a legacy project where students could present anything meaningful about their past, Malik knew exactly what he was going to do. He started 3 months ago. Building, coding, researching. He collected interviews from the men his father saved. He even found dashcam footage from the final fire. He wanted to show people who his father really was. Not through a newspaper article, but through Malik's own voice. Through tech, through emotion, through memory. His backpack didn't carry danger. It carried legacy. It carried a tribute. It carried everything he had left of the man who taught him to stand tall without ever raising his voice. But no one in that classroom knew any of that, because no one had ever bothered to ask. Until now. Monday started the same way most Mondays did. Sluggish, routine, and wrapped in forced small talk. But this one had a different kind of energy humming underneath. The classroom hadn't forgotten what happened Friday. Not the slap. Not the backpack. Not the silence. Especially not the silence. And while no one said it out loud, they were waiting. Watching Malik more closely now, but not in admiration. It was the look people gave a storm cloud. Quiet unease, with no clue when or where the lightning might hit. Tyler didn't back down. That wasn't in his nature. If anything, he doubled down, fueled by bruised ego and whispers that the quiet kid made him look stupid. Malik didn't respond. He didn't even look up when Tyler walked past his desk and muttered, "Better watch your back, freak." But Malik heard it, just like he heard the laughs, just like he saw the hallway poster torn down that had his dad's face on it, the one he spent 2 days designing for the school's legacy project wall. He noticed everything. That day at lunch, someone dumped a tray of milk beside his backpack. The liquid seeped in slow, soaking the bottom before Malik calmly pulled it away and sat down without a word. The girls at the next table giggled like it was just a dumb prank. But Malik didn't even flinch. He pulled out his laptop, still, dry inside its case, and resumed typing. Tyler hated that. He wanted a reaction. But Malik had learned something most bullies never would. The scariest people aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who absorb it all and stay quiet. In the days that followed, the little things grew louder. Someone carved "Silent Psycho" into his locker door. Another left a dead mouse inside his desk drawer. The teachers acted oblivious, shrugging off complaints as unconfirmed and asking Malik if maybe he wanted to consider working with a counselor. He nodded, then said nothing. But inside, Malik had already started documenting everything. Photos, audio clips, Even hallway security feeds he accessed through a backdoor login he had quietly coded in his sophomore year, just to see if he could. Turned out he could do a lot. At night he edited, compiled, layered timelines, cross-referenced faces with incident dates. It wasn't just about him anymore. He had footage of other students being pushed, girls being cornered, teachers walking away. And he wove it all into a single thread. Not a revenge piece, not a takedown. Something else, something undeniable. One evening, as his grandmother made tea in the kitchen, she glanced at him under the lamp glow. "Still building that fireman tribute?" she asked. Malik looked up, eyes steady. "Not anymore," he said, then paused. "Now I'm building the truth." Friday rolled around again, and this time the air inside the school felt heavier than usual. Not loud or chaotic, just dense, like something was waiting to unfold. Malik sat in his usual spot, same calm face, same black backpack resting neatly by his feet. Nothing about him screamed different, but the silence that surrounded him wasn't just quiet anymore, it was charged. Every student who glanced his way remembered last Friday. No one dared say it aloud, but the memory still lingered. The slap, the zipper, the freeze. And today, Malik's stillness carried a warning no one wanted to misread. Tyler walked in with the same arrogance as always, 15 minutes late and smirking like the room belonged to him. He strutted past desks with the same energy he always did, trailing dominance behind him like a bad perfume. He passed Malik, dragging his fingers across the edge of his desk, waiting for a twitch, a glance, any reaction at all. Malik didn't even blink. That quietness hit harder than a slap. Tyler leaned in, voice sharp and hushed but loud enough for half the room to hear. "Still writing, Malik? What is it now? Another love letter to your creepy dead dad?" The words dropped like broken glass. The students who heard it winced. Some stared at the floor. Some looked straight at Malik to see what he'd do. He did nothing, just closed his notebook slowly, turned his face ever so slightly toward Tyler, and looked right through him. No fear, no shake, just stillness that said more than any punch could. Then, just as casually, he looked away again. Tyler couldn't handle it. His ego couldn't take the indifference. Without warning, he lunged down, grabbed Malik's backpack, ripped it open, and dumped everything onto the floor. Not just papers, not just supplies. It was work, delicate, components, a small circuit board, photographs, a handmade box. All of it fell with soft thuds that hit harder than fists. The classroom gasped. One student's phone was already recording. The teacher froze, hands halfway in the air, unsure whether to intervene or stay invisible. Malik looked down at the mess, took a slow breath, and moved with precision. He picked up the box, the same one he had placed on his desk days earlier, now reinforced and gleaming under the classroom lights. Then, silently, he placed it on his desk again and reached for the tablet among the mess. His voice broke the silence like thunder under water. "You wanted to know what I've been building," he said, eyes fixed on the class. "Here it is." The lights dimmed, the projector screen glowed to life, and the story began. Video footage showed his father, Captain Darius Cole, in full gear, charging into smoke-filled chaos, saving lives, disappearing behind a wall of flames. Then came the survivor testimonies. Then Malik's voiceover, a calm, clear narration about sacrifice, bravery, and what it costs to be unseen. Then the funeral, A boy in black, a folded flag, a silence no one had earned the right to laugh at. The screen faded to black. White letters appeared slowly. This is what silence carries, and this is what you laughed at. No one dared breathe. Malik looked around, not seeking approval, not demanding pity, just watching, just present. And for the first time, they didn't see him as that quiet kid. They saw him as something else entirely, and they weren't ready for it. The classroom didn't go back to normal after the video ended. It couldn't. The screen was black now, but the images still echoed behind every pair of eyes in the room. No one said a word. Even the teacher stood motionless near his desk, one hand still on the corner of his laptop, as if he was unsure whether to turn it off or keep watching. Nothing. Tyler sat with his arms crossed, but not with his usual confidence. His jaw was tight, eyes flicking toward the floor every few seconds. The swagger had drained from him entirely, replaced with something new, something uncomfortable. Something. Close to shame, Malik didn't wait for permission to speak again. He didn't need it. He picked up the last piece of the puzzle, the circuit board he had crafted with steady hands night after night in silence, and held it in his palm. This was supposed to power a replica badge for the school museum, he said softly. Not for me, for him. Because when people remember heroes, they usually forget their silence. A chair squeaked somewhere in the back. No one dared follow the sound. Malik set the board gently beside the box and began placing each component back into the backpack, each one like a truth restored to its place. He didn't rush. He didn't look up for approval or permission. His hands moved with quiet control, and his breathing never broke rhythm. It was a kind of dignity no one in the room had ever seen before, not in a classmate, not in a kid they used to overlook, and certainly not in someone they had mocked. He zipped the bag slowly, stood tall, and looked around the room. When his eyes met the teacher's, something passed between them. The teacher, usually detached, usually too tired to care, lowered his head for a moment. Not out of guilt, but respect. He didn't say sorry, and Malik didn't expect him to. Some things didn't need to be spoken anymore. Tyler's voice finally broke the silence. It was small, hollow. "I didn't know," he muttered. Malik turned, gaze calm but sharp. "You didn't want to." That one sentence landed like a quiet blow. Not loud, but final. Tyler had no answer. He just sat there, shrinking beneath, the very presence he used to tower over. The bell rang. No one moved. Eventually, students began to stand, slower than usual, more thoughtful. Phones stayed in pockets. Whispers were absent. No one laughed. As Malik walked out, the crowd parted like mist. One girl, Ava, reached out gently as he passed. "That was beautiful," she said. Malik nodded once. No smile, no pride. Just acknowledgement. By the time he reached the hallway, news had already traveled. Students from other classes stood near lockers whispering about the video, about Tyler, about Malik. But for once, the silence surrounding Malik didn't feel isolating. It felt earned. At home that night, Malik sat beside his grandmother. She was knitting on the couch. The TV played quietly in the background. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She glanced at him once, just once, and he gave a small nod. "That's my boy," she whispered. He didn't reply. He just opened his journal and wrote one line across the page. When silence is forced to speak, it doesn't ask for attention. It demands it. Monday morning didn't begin like any other. The moment Malik walked through the front doors of the school, the difference was clear. The usual snickers had vanished. Students didn't just move out of his way, they noticed him now. Some nodded respectfully. A few even whispered his name like it carried weight. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, the uneasy admiration that comes when you realize the person you thought was background was actually the foundation. Posters for the Legacy Showcase had quietly been updated over the weekend. Right at the center of the display wall was a new headliner. In honor of Captain Darius Cole, presented by Malik Cole. Below it, the school had printed a QR code that linked to the very tribute Malik had played in class. Even those who hadn't seen it firsthand now had a way to watch the story unfold. The administration called him into the office by third period. Principal Alvarez sat upright, visibly nervous, her tone a practiced mix of authority and apology. She thanked Malik for his important voice, called him an inspiration to the student body, and extended an invitation to speak at the upcoming school-wide assembly. He nodded quietly, only asking one question. Will you be adding an anti-bullying curriculum next semester? Her hesitation spoke volumes, but eventually she said yes. Back in the halls, Tyler was nowhere to be seen. Whispers floated that he had been suspended for a week, possibly facing a disciplinary hearing. Malik didn't celebrate it. He didn't need to. That kind of justice, the institutional kind, was slow and rarely clean. But what mattered was the shift. For the first time, the system had moved in his direction instead of away from him. Later that week, during gym, Coach Reynolds approached him. A former Marine with a no-nonsense attitude, he wasn't known for soft words. But he paused beside Malik during warm-ups and said, "Saw the video. Your old man. He was the real deal." Malik just nodded. That was enough. By Friday, something surprising happened. Students started showing up at the media lab during lunch asking Malik for help, with editing, with presentations, even with personal projects. Some wanted advice. Some just wanted to sit with him. And though he didn't speak much, he made space for them. One table in the cafeteria, the one Malik always sat at alone, slowly became a quiet circle of kids who knew what it meant to feel unseen. The teacher who once ignored Tyler's jabs now took attendance with more intention. She asked questions, listened, not just to Malik, but to others, too. Something had changed. At home, his grandmother framed a printed version of the Legacy Tribute's homepage. Beneath the headline was a single quote in bold text. He didn't raise his voice. He raised the room. And as Malik stood before the school auditorium the following week, speaking not with volume but with clarity, the silence that once made him invisible now held the room together. The assembly hall echoed with stillness even before Malik took the stage. Hundreds of students sat in rows, shoulders touching, breaths held in that suspended kind of quiet that feels heavier than noise. Teachers stood along the walls, arms folded, not out of disapproval this time, but something closer to respect. The principal adjusted her mic at the podium and introduced Malik's name with a tone that tried to hide nervousness with pride. There was no cheering, no clapping, just silence. And for Malik, that was perfect. He walked to the center of the stage calmly, backpack over one shoulder, dressed in a simple gray hoodie and dark jeans. No tie, no formality. Just Malik. The lights above him cast a gentle glow on his face, and for a long second he just stood there, looking at them, letting them really look at him. Then he spoke. "You don't really notice silence," he began, voice clear but low, "until it's the only thing left in a room." The line lingered. I didn't speak much because most of the time I knew no one was listening. And the truth is, silence is safer. You can't laugh at someone who doesn't say anything. You can't mock what you don't understand. He paused, scanning the crowd. No one moved. Phones were down. Even Tyler, recently reinstated, sat near the back with his hands in his lap, eyes forward. My father didn't shout when he saved lives. He didn't scream into burning buildings or demand applause. He just acted. And I used to think maybe that was weakness. Maybe silence was the reason people forget you. He turned slightly, his voice steady. But now I understand. Silence isn't about hiding. It's about waiting for the right moment to speak. And when that moment comes, if you've listened long enough, what you say will matter. The students leaned in, not out of curiosity, but out of something deeper. Reverence. "I'm not asking you to be silent," he added. "I'm asking you to notice who is, and ask why." He stepped back from the mic just slightly and pulled something from his backpack. The same tribute box, now sealed and polished. He placed it at the front of the stage, next to a small stand that had been set up without explanation. No more words. No dramatic ending. Just that action. And then he walked off stage. The applause didn't erupt right away. It built slowly, like the room had to remember how to make noise again. But once it started, it spread, strong and sustained. Students stood, teachers stood, even Tyler clapped, awkward and unsure, but real. Later that night, Malik sat on the front steps of his apartment, notebook open on his lap, head tilted toward the sky. His grandmother sat beside him, holding her tea, her gaze following his. "You think they understood?" she asked gently. Malik didn't look away from the stars. "They felt it," he said. "That's enough." He wrote one last line in his journal before closing it. They mocked the quiet, but it was the quiet that remembered, that waited, that rose. And somewhere in the stillness of the night the truth settled like dust in light. Silent, steady, unshakable. If you've ever been underestimated, judged too soon, or ignored until it was too late, drop your city in the comments. Hit like if you believe silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom waiting to be heard. And follow for more stories that remind the world. The quiet ones? They're the ones you never see coming until it's already too late.